Every show is a great adventure.
This was Adrian's idea, actually. He was thinking about it at least 5 years ago that I know of, and it took a long time, as he'll tell you in more detail, to put it together because of COVID came and went. Schedules, whenever you have a band that meshes together guys who were in other bands, you have the schedule of those bands. So you have to wait maybe a year, and how long is it going to be until everybody's schedule allow for a few months together? So it took that long because of that. Adrian and the management, a guy named Scroat, really worked for years to try and put it together.
The initial idea was myself and the producer for David Bowie's shows that we did, Scroat, Angelo Bondini. And we were tossing around ideas. I was saying, you know, I really want to see if maybe we can do a 40th anniversary something with King Crimson, because in 1981, 2 years from then, would be the 40th anniversary. And he said, well, you should call Robert about that and see if that can happen. So I did call Robert, and he expressed, kind of, wow, well, that's an interesting idea. I have so many things I've already planned. I'm pretty sure I cannot do it, but if you want to drive it and you really feel passionate about it, I'll try to support it. The next day, he wrote me a long email telling me all the things that he was doing over the next 3 years and planned, and why he couldn't do it. So I went back and talked to Scroat, and I said, well, Robert can't do it. And Scroat said, well, maybe we should try to do it. I said, I don't know, how would that work, We kept thinking about it. I kept thinking about it a lot, because I was really thinking this music really deserved to be heard again. And I was a little bit personally worried that if I never got to play it and no one ever played it again, it might just be sort of in the dustbin, because they had just done 7 years worth of playing as King Crimson without any of that music. We started talking about it, brainstorming about it, and I said, well, let's start with Robert. You have to cover Robert's chair. There's no sense in even starting. There's only one person I can think of, and that's because I read this interview years back with Steve Vai, and Steve Vai said he loved what Robert did, was fascinated by what Robert did, and loved those 3 records. On those 3 records, he just thought that was the greatest. And I said, if anybody could do it, it'll be Steve Vai. So Scroat said, well, I'll get his number and you can call him. I called Steve. Hey, Steve, I've got this idea, blah, blah, blah. And I'd like to maybe think about doing some shows. We would be doing the 80s King Crimson music. What do you think of that? And he said, oh my God, I'd love to do that. That's so exciting. And I'm like, wow, really? You're kidding. He said, no, I'd love to do it. What a challenge that would be, etc. We had a short conversation, but I went back and said, okay, we got Steve Vai, I think. Let's start going.
I was attracted to that music way back when I was 21 and it came out. I was one of those people that just fell in love with what they were doing. I recognized certain uniquenesses about it that maybe someone that's not a musician might feel, but they can't recognize. And I knew that under the hood, there was a lot going on. It was fascinating to me because for some reason, I was always interested in high information music, compositional things, complexities, but I liked when it was music and not noise. That's why I was so attracted to Zappa. Frank, the music part, some of it was extraordinarily complex, but it was melodic and pleasing. And of course, some of it was ugly as hell, but he did that on purpose. But the Crimson music held a place in my heart, and so did Robert Fripp. I didn't know as much about Adrian, except his Zappa days, at the time, and that he was also doing these fantastic gigs with all these great artists. Flash forward 40 years, I had a great career doing all the rock stuff in the 80s. Through the years, I would receive offers to join various bands, but most of the time it was like a desire to relive the glory days of yore. And I love that music, obviously, but I didn't want to repeat it. So I would always say, no, I have no real desire to join a super band unless somebody came along that wanted to do something that was very innovative just pure, let's just create, and but accessible and listenable. But nobody's knocking on my door to do that. And then the phone rings and it's Adrian Belew. And I'm like, yup. When he asked me, immediately, I saw the whole thing. I saw the show in my head. I was going to be on the side. I was going to have parts. They were going to be those parts. I saw it and I thought, yes, this is what I'm here for.
Let's just do it our own way, but keep the essential things that make it what it is. They put me in charge of making the set list, which I did with Crimson most of the time anyway. And I just felt like, well, there were 16 songs. There were 14 of those songs I felt really great about singing and doing again as the frontman and singer. And then we talked about the instrumental ones, which very important ones too. And Steve Vai said he wanted to do Red, but he didn't really want to do Larks. We wanted to do something from the previous incarnation. We started looking at songs like Sartori in Tangier, which is really a Tony vehicle, but now it's a Steve vehicle with me doing a little thing in the middle, and it still very much feels like the record, but it's us playing our own way. And the same thing happens with Industry, incredible Industry, and Sheltering Sky. That's a huge one because that's the one where Steve Vai really gets to show Steve Vai at the end when he does his own version and kind of takes it somewhere new.
There's many guitar players that could play those parts, Robert's parts, authentically, and I'm not one of them. Do you know what I mean? Because with all the respect, I never developed that kind of style that he had. Robert Fripp's picking style and his playing style is intense, forensic, myopic in a sense, you know. But his approach is very holistic. It's not just about you pick like this. There's a whole picture to it. I know that the fan base of King Crimson, very Fripp-centric fans, I had a challenge there because I wanted to do justice for them also, because unfortunately Robert's just not there. I know from being a fan of other bands and also a fan of this band, if somebody got up there and abused the parts or didn't respect them, I would be disappointed, and especially if it was Steve Vai.
The experience of revisiting the Crimson music of the 80s is special to me. I've played some of this music a lot since the 80s in different bands, including in King Crimson. Most of it I have not played because some of it we didn't even play at the time. We just kind of did that third album and then broke up or reformed. So it's a worthwhile experience for me to revisit that music. But what excited me about this tour was not specifically revisiting the music, but revisiting it with this lineup, seeing where it could go with different players, really great players, and that's what, to quote Stravinsky, that's what makes my mouth water about the tour and about the music, where it can go and how it can vary from the way it was. It was pretty darn good on the road with King Crimson in the 80s as we did it, but we're taking it different places and that's fun for me.
I set out to try to make sure that that particular sound, that the guitar synth stuff and the interwoven guitar stuff was correct. And in doing that, I went back to my old gear, which I still had. I had the original GR300, I had the Twang Bar King guitar, and I had the original Roland JC120. I almost brought the old Strap, and I realized at some point the only thing I wanted to do with it was get that kind of oscillating feedback thing that I used to do, and I realized I could actually do it with the Twang Bar guitar. So I said, okay, I'd rather just bring one of my precious old guitars. And it took a long time to get all those old devices. Some of those were stolen of mine over years ago. So to find exactly the right big muff, there are 8 big muffs, Styles, and my friend Blair White, who owns a used music store in Nashville brought over 8, and we worked through all of them, and there was one, version 4, that has a tone switch on the front, the only one that has that. And when we moved the tone switch, instead of it squealing like all the others did, it did it. It was a magical moment. There it is. But I went through a lot of that kind of trial and error to get all that stuff to be where it is.
My goal in going into it was I have to respect the notes the best I can. The way one guitar player hits a note is different than anybody else in reality. So it's naturally anything I play, even if it's Eddie Van Halen parts or whatever, it's going to sound like me in a sense. But if the notes are there, then I feel like I'm respecting the music. And I wanted to because I love Robert's notes. So then when the time came to actually learn this stuff, I really had to look under the hood. I was fortunate because a bunch of guys had done some real forensic transcriptions of those 3 records. And the book was like a treasure for me. Because if you listen to those records and you listen to what Robert and Adrian are doing, they have similar tones, similar amps, and they're doing this interlocking polymetric guitar stuff that it's hard to hear. I've got pretty good ears for transcribing that stuff, but wow, I'm like, how am I gonna, you know? And then I got the book, and these guys were so detail-oriented. So the book was a godsend, and once I started learning, putting my fingers on it, some of the stuff I'd say, well, maybe I'll do it like this, same notes, just different positionings and things, and you know, that I do on certain things, but a handful of the songs are composed in such a way on the guitar that you just can't do it any other way. And I tried. Things like Three of a Perfect Pair, that riff, it's a ridiculous riff. It requires like, you know, barring notes, hitting a note on the A string with your pinky and then hitting a note on the B string with your pinky at a speed that, you know, with all sorts of other notes flying all over. And I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out another way, you know? I couldn't. Not keeping the authenticity of the note, because that song, it has to go like that. I mean, I could have made up a rhythm, I could have cheated my way through it, but I love that kind of challenge.
It's incredible what happens, the chemistry, when you have that material and people who've waited a long time to hear that material again, and then you introduce players who are able to make it their own and stay true to the form and the intent of the music, which is what I said as the, quote, band leader, which I don't like being a band leader, I'm not very good at that, but I said, look guys, that's what I want you to do. Steve and I talked on the phone a lot for a long time, and he would send me a video every few days. How about this? How about, here's the way I think, and I might do this. And I loved what he was doing because instead of playing, let's say Elephant Talk, that's Robert's part. He turned it into a rhythm part. In 7 still, same notes, but a different feel. The overall thing about this band that a lot of people say, apart from how much fun we're having, is how much it just swings. It's just a different feeling version of that music. And that's what we wanted. I said, I don't want it to be exactly the same, except that there are certain things, you know, obviously the notes, and there are certain moments that have to come across the same, but there's elasticity in there built into the music anyway. Let's use it. Let's express ourselves. And Danny, for a while, Danny was just trying to play so much like Bill and doing a great job at it. And then eventually, he just turned into Danny Carey. And oh my God, it was like, whew, every night we stand when he does his drum solo, we just go, wow, it's different every night.
There were things that were really outside of my wheelhouse. You take something like Frame by Frame. You know, in the pantheons of guitar virtuosity, if you want to test your skills, try that. And it's just 4 notes. Robert has these strong hands, very disciplined approach, and in frame by frame he created this beautiful little tapestry of what sounds to me like the representation of frames moving very quickly. If I have a part and I can't be consistent every night, I am uncomfortable with that, and I want to make sure that every time I play it, it's going to be there. With something like frame by frame, I just couldn't do it the way Robert did it. So I was trying to think, what can I do to honor the notes, but do it in a way that I could do it? So I came up with double picking it. And I could do that consistently. It didn't quite feel like I was doing justice in a way, but it was the best I could do.
The first rehearsal was interesting because the guys had done their homework extremely well. Steve Vai only had to learn Robert Fripp's guitar parts. He had done that. He had been practicing at that point for 8 months, and Danny Carey was up and ready to go on all the material. But that's only the beginning. Adrian and I, of course, had practiced, and we knew the stuff almost to begin with. That's the beginning of fashioning a new band and learning what's going to happen when you actually play together. Other things happen than just reproducing the record. Guys make mistakes. How do you react? That's a big thing. I rehearse a lot, not through choice, and some of it is learning what to do when someone makes a mistake, because different bands have different ways to recover. And of course, when you're a new band and you don't really know, especially with King Crimson cross time signatures, someone gets off a little bit. Is he rewriting the piece? Does he know what he's doing? Is he going to join me at letter B? Or is he wrong and or should I join him? That stuff you don't really think exactly the way I just said it, but that's the stuff that only happens by playing together a lot. So the first rehearsal was a lot of that. We could run it down, but if we tried to really dig in and play it, unusual things happen.
I wanted to rehearse on my own because I had been doing the Reimagined light shows and the camp and so many other things. I had to center up, and I'd really not had enough time with my own new gear. So I came to LA on August 18th and rehearsed for 4 days. Then everyone arrived, and we said, well, before we go in the full production studio, rental place that we have, let's go to Steve Vai's studio and just sit more quietly. And, and we kind of all crowded into this room. I was here, Steve was facing me here. There was a baffle, then Danny was facing me here, then over there was Tony facing me, and I couldn't hear anything. I mean, I had everybody pointing at me, and I was getting so worried, like, oh my gosh, I don't know. But, we really were just trying to make sure we could work through the arrangements without everybody full volume and all that, and I think we did that for 4 or 5 days, and at the end of it, we were feeling like, all right, yeah, we got our work cut out for us, but we do have 3 weeks, and we just buckled up, and when we went in the full on rehearsal spot, with PA, not lighting, but PA. I think, then we really started locking in. But it was a good chance for us to stop and for me to say, like, Steve, right here, how do you think we want to work out of this here? And we talk about the parts and refer to them, because we were in Steve's studio. It was wonderful. He has a studio sitting, well, let's see, let's listen. And, and we had... We had the King Crimson book, which means nothing to me since I don't read music, but everybody else, Steve especially, was like looking at it, he learned a lot from it. So that was our period there, that pre-production period where I think we were worried for a while. I was, at least, but more worried for myself. I wasn't worried about the other guys at all, ever. And you could hear the singing a little bit, and you could hear everybody a little bit. It wasn't perfect, but it got us there. I knew at a certain point that, okay, this is going to be fabulous. There's just no way around it.
We originally scheduled a couple of weeks of rehearsing, which is plenty for players at this level who have learned the stuff, come in at the first rehearsal, we knew the stuff. Shortly before the rehearsals, we added another week. We thought, let's be sure we have it together. And let's add a friends and family show, running through the show. We had run through it a number of times, and running through it for an audience. So we were pretty thoroughly prepared. And as we knew would happen, surprises happened a lot, not only the first show, but the first few, and very honorable representation of the music, and we were very pleased that the audience liked it so much, and we were having a ball. And then the first week or 2 weeks even of shows, the same. Lots of surprises, lots of seeing, oh, it went there, I didn't expect that. Lots of surprises for us in the band. Good ones, good surprises, and lots of mistakes. And then gradually, as will happen after you've done 10, 20, 30 shows, either less mistakes or more room to just really go, to be in a different time signature for a while. And okay, the guys know I'll join them at the pass.
So this is a funny story. We get past our second show, and I get an email from Robert. He was commenting on some of the clips he saw, which was very, very nice and constructive. And then he said at the end, can I make a suggestion for frame? Why don't you do your hammering with the notes and then take it out? Just improvise your hammering stuff and then moved from one chord to the other. And this was something I kind of thought in the beginning, but I thought it would be so far away from the original that maybe I was crossing a line. But here it is, he's recommending it. And I just went, bing, and that night, I tried it for the first time. It was a very interesting combination of people to make that part the way it is. It took Adrian and Robert to sit down and, write the piece. It took Robert to come up with his part, and then it took Robert to make the suggestion, and then it took my skills to manifest it. So it's really a beautiful kind of a thing. But everything else, I either do it the way he did it, or I play the same notes, but I change it so that it works for me.
It's an ensemble kind of playing, and not a lot of bands can ever really achieve that. You're talking about music that has multiple time signatures, so different people are doing different things. And you might say, well, I want to change right here at this point, and the guy will go, well, I'm in 7/8 right there. Let me think. What do I have to do to... We did 10 shows, and I think everyone felt like it. Within the 10 shows, a lot of great things happened, but 10th show, we gelled, and that was that. And from that moment on, there's never looked back. That makes you feel good. And the other night, we did a show where all of a sudden, I said just out of the blue, hey, if you want to come down and dance, I was kidding. Like I said, good luck, is what I said. And that was for Thela Hunjinji, the last song of the night. And all of a sudden, I saw all these young people rush down the aisle and get right in the front. They started jumping up and down, and they were 16, 18-year-old kids. We were all so thrilled. We were like, wow, it's not just old guys. This has gone somewhere new. I'd known Danny Carey for a long time, and from the moment I ever met Danny, he hugged me and said, oh, that Crimson stuff you guys did in the 80s, that changed my life, I loved that music, it changed everything, I loved Bill Bruford, and I thought, Danny Carey, he's got to be the right guy. Danny is the sweetest, most positive guy you could ever meet. He's like a Greek god, this great big beautiful guy, and with this smile on his face at all times, and so everyone in the band there's never been a complaint.
It's been a while since I played with Bill. Certainly I played subsequent to the 80s, plenty with him in the 90s, and then we had a little band called Bruford Levin Upper Extremities. I think I need to write an essay or think a month about comparing Danny's playing to Bill's. It's different. There are similarities, but mostly it's just a different experience with a different drummer. I'll regret it if I try to dig into specifics, but I'll say this, they both surprise me a lot with their playing. Bill always did, nightly, and Danny does a lot of times.
Danny, it was interesting because it started out where, holy mackerel, we got to learn this music. Is this right? Okay, all right, are you coming in here? Okay, so there's all of that, and that's what rehearsals are for, and you grind it, until you can start opening up. That's the way it is with this music. It's not like, okay, here's the chords, let's go. You know, it's like a terrain that you have to navigate, and that you got a heavy backpack, you know. So in the beginning, he was playing great, you know, he was playing the parts and everything was great, but then there was a rebirth or something, slowly. And within the first few weeks, that's when his real brilliance came through, and I recognized it. Like really deep connectedness with rhythm and instant creativity over beats. It's hard to explain because I've worked with a lot of drummers, and I can see when people know what they're doing, they're going to play this rhythm over that rhythm, and it's a practiced, thought out kind of a approach. But with Danny, it's on the fly, and it doesn't have anything to do with the convention of conventional polymetric or polyrhythmic or kind of playing. It's just this open, free inspiration, and it's grande, as they say. It's huge, the tone of the kick and the snare. But the way he opened up through this tour was remarkable. He never repeats himself. It's astonishing. It's like a whole different book every time.
He bought a lot of Bill's stuff when Bill retired and they started auctioning it off. In fact, I had a drum kit, and he has that drum kit now, one of Bill's drum kits. Anyway, yeah, the power from Danny is so different. I mean, Bill's a fabulous drummer, my favorite drummer for so many years. And watching Bill play, and I learned a lot from him, he's sort of like, he's got this jazz thing, it's all in his wrists, and it just looks like he's kind of stirring soup here, or something. Like, how does he make it look so simple and light? Never really hits hard. He always told me, it's in your wrist when you're pulling back, snapping it. Danny, on the other hand, has the power. He's a big guy. His drums are big, they sound big. And so it's a different thing. And both very valid for this music. I pinch myself all the time. I mean, I had breakfast with Steve O, Glendenning, the kind of does everything business-wise every day. I get a readout on all the money, the merchandise, everything. It's such a great change to have such transparency. And every time we have breakfast, we start talking about how incredible this is, how this came up, how it actually ended up being what it is. Just amazes all of us still. I've never seen Tony Levin so happy, and I've worked with him since 1981.